So, I mean, I will have my coffee as well. So, I mean, you can have your coffee if you want. Okay. And my first, like, obligatory question I tend to ask that. So, where were you born and raised? Can you give us some idea, Lauren?
Yes, absolutely. I was born and raised in Fife, and I've been here ever since. Born specifically in Kirkcaldy, which is where my grandparents grew up, and I was raised in Glenrothes for a while, and then we moved out to the smaller villages. So I'm in a really rural area just now. And I've since got my own house here as well. So it's lovely having a view, being surrounded by fields and sheep and chickens. It proves a nice change of pace from busy work life.
Mm-hmm. So, like, did you spend your earliest days in like Kirkcaldy?
So so I was born in Kirkcaldy, but I was raised, we were living at the time in Glenrothes.
Okay.
And that's where I was there until I was about 9 years old. And then we moved. And I mean, some of my earliest memories were of visiting our local library with my mum. And that it was always I was so excited to have my library card that I was allowed to take out about 8 books, I think it was. So I would go and max it out every time. That was just so exciting for me. And she would take me to the story corner and read to me in the library. And that was really our happy place. And that's been a lasting memory that shaped who I am as a person now.
Good. So, like, what was the first book you can still remember? The first book from the library?
I remember we read a lot of Spot the Dog books. And so I specifically remember a book that you could take in the bath. So it was like waterproof, and it was of Spot the Dog. It was only about 5 pages long. And it was Spot Goes to the Beach or whatever. And there were just lovely stories that we could share together. Mum had a few really ancient versions of fairy tales. So she had a Jack and the Beanstalk book, Rumpelstiltskin. So we would share a lot of fairy tales back then as well. And I've just finished writing my doctoral thesis on fairy tales. So again, these things I feel really stick with you, the early memories. So I really liked that. And then I moved into fantasy when I was slightly older. So when I was able to choose books myself and read myself, there was a lot of children's fantasy that I was interested in, but also the likes of Goosebumps, so slightly the scarier books. And what I find really interesting is that back then, young adult literature was not really marketed as such. So I remember jumping from Jacqueline Wilson books to Stephen King books. There was never an in-between. Whereas now, obviously, there is. So I really like promoting what's out there now because, yeah, there's so many fantastic titles.
So, like, I mean, you have been reading quite a lot over the years. I mean, and then you are doing Ph.D. So it's like kind of lifelong reading, like fictions or novels or like,
Yeah.
so that's kind of like dream life, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it really gets to a point where if I was really tired with my thesis, I would long for a holiday where I could just read other books. So my downtime is still literature, because I just get I'm fascinated by all the titles that are out there. Even now that I've finished my project, I'm thinking about next steps in terms of research and things that have come up over the years, but I've not been able to fully look into. So it's really great having the opportunity now to be able to think further about that. But in terms of, I mean, children's literature by itself, obviously that's one of my main passions. And there's just so much depth in the titles that are out there. And that's why I think it's really important not only to share those types of books with our kids, but also to talk about them academically and promote them, because especially when we look into ways in which they can help readers through bibliotherapy, it's really important because there's a lot of books out there that cover really complex and challenging issues.
Mm, mm. So like from those earliest memories, like going to library with your mom, and then this like reading those waterproof books, I mean, and then you move to the schools. I mean,
Yeah.
any memories from the school where more or less continued your journey?
Yes. So this I think it was the Scholastic Book Fair. The school book fair was always a big deal. I was so excited for that. And certain things remain with you. For me, it's a lot of sensory things. So the smell of the book fair, the smell of the new books. And you would come with a book token that you would pick up. I can't remember where we got them, but the book token gave you a discount. I think it was on the books. And that, I mean, we were like working class background and stuff. So it was really special, the thought of getting a new book. So these school fairs were incredible because you knew that you could choose one. So what was that one going to be? Often for me, it was Roald Dahl because I was really into his work. But it just, again, it was kid in a sweetie shop. It was all the possibilities and not really knowing what to go for. So that stuck with me. As did, we used to get visits from a mobile library. So again, because we were quite rural, the mobile library would come round, and I remember going in and just picking out, we were allowed one or two, and that's where it was just, again, it was really exciting. Like I said, books have seriously formed the person that I am now, and I think it's just because of all the different adventures that you could go on.
Did you have any like good memories with any of your school teachers who more or less, inspired you to do like more about these things?
Interestingly, not particularly with English. In secondary school, I had a fantastic English teacher in my 6th year who took us on a field trip to Stirling University to see the English department. Now, at that point, all throughout school and all throughout high school, I was bullied quite severely. And I naturally looked for an escape. And for me, that escape was playing classical music. So I'm classically trained in guitar. And throughout high school, it was the music rooms that I would go to at lunchtime or perform at concerts because I excelled at that, because I worked at that. So part of the escapism from the bullying was rehearsing guitar. And I mean, this is a different question, but my guitar teacher and my music teacher in high school played a significant role in my life. And it was the support that they gave me. And because of that, I really wanted to excel. So I worked hard, and therefore I became really good at it. So I would compete, I would win a lot of these competitions. So I got used to that feeling. So I wanted to do more. So for me, I was always going to go and study music. And then we went on this trip to Stirling Uni. And I remember we did a little bit of work analysing poetry. And that's really where I realised I really enjoyed it. So it kind of opened my eyes, and it just shows you the importance of these types of school trips that you maybe don't realise at the time, but they can literally shape an individual's future. So we went, and I had some practice doing that, and I realised I wanted to do that for a living. So very last minute, there was a sharp career change from music to English. I had to work. My grades were not fantastic. There were straight A's in music, but not in English. So that was where I approached Dundee, and thankfully they took me. And I had to work really hard to get my grades for English and to get where I am now. And I would never look back because I loved it. So, yeah.
So like, you were a musician a bit. Like, I mean, do you still do those stuff? Like carry on your...
I do, yes. So so I was trained to grade 8 when I was in school, and I was playing professionally, but I was practicing about 6 hours a day. Wow. Between lunchtime and evenings. And it's who I was as a person. It, like I said, that was my life pretty much at school. So naturally, when I started my English degree undergraduate, I had to flip that focus. So I still played a little bit, but my main, because I had to put a lot of effort in, my main work was around teaching myself English, reading all the prescribed literature, but also learning how to write an essay, really taking it back to the basics. So I stopped playing for quite a while. And it was only really recently when I was doing my PhD that I realized it was a fantastic shift for me in my focus. You know, when we're thinking about well-being and mental health, it's great to have, again, that escape. So for me, because I read music, so reading something else, taking myself away from words into notation, reading music and playing music, my brain almost just switches off and I just become focused in the piece that I'm playing. So recently I've started getting back into it because I realized it's fantastic. And there weren't nearly, you know, these were back in the days where you didn't really video yourself playing. So there's not really any documentation out there on how I used to play. And I'm quite sad about that because I'll possibly never be that good again. So I need to get myself back to where I was. Yes.
Like, I mean, what kind of instruments do you play?
So in school, I played classical guitar and a little bit of piano. And it was the guitar that I was really interested in and I excelled in. And that upbringing has never left me in terms of when I wrote my thesis, I would always write to classical music playing. So I have a soundtrack and it's all, a lot of it too is classical music scores from films. So I really like John Williams and Thomas Newman. And there's just something about that where there's no words, there's no lyrics, but the music and the writing for some reason just combined really well. So they allowed me to fully immerse myself in my writing and focus whilst having that playing. And it's not something I'd done before, and I don't feel I would have been able to succeed with my writing had I not had the music on as well. Lovely way to combine them.
Did you have any like particular music teachers for those things, or you were more like self-learner?
No. We had a guitar teacher, Mr. Morrison, who would, I think he covered several high schools. And he would come and visit his students at my high school, and he was fantastic. Like I said, he was just such a huge part of my life, very supportive, encouraging. He was really talented himself. And yeah, he loved my enthusiasm, I think, but also I think I was a bit of a challenge. I always wanted to play harder pieces. I always wanted to progress. And he really embraced that. I also had a music teacher, Mr. Sharp, who likewise was just incredibly supportive of us. And that truly was my happy place in school, more so than any other department. So that's why I feel it's interesting how my life has progressed since.
Like, I mean, where did it come from? Like, I mean, were your parents involved in some kind of music stuff in their own lives? I mean,
so my dad does play guitar, but he doesn't read music. It's not classical guitar he plays. I was always brought up in a musical household. My uncle is a musician, so that was always there, but I'm not sure I would say that was an influence back then. I don't know, I just feel like it was a perfect escape. I remember we started playing, I think it was primary school, I started playing guitar. That's where I first met my guitar teacher, and then that moved up to high school. And I can't describe it. I just really took to it. I really liked it. And I was given a beautiful new guitar when I moved up to a full-size guitar, and it was a classical instrument and the sound was beautiful. So I really just progressed from there. So I mean, I have to say, like I said, the external factors, so the bullying, the tough time that I had, I can't thank these people more because now I see how it shaped me as a person, and the relentless support from my family. They really supported me as I was learning and progressing and taking me to all my rehearsals and everything. It truly was a big factor. So definitely.
Will you be okay if I touch some of the stuff about, this like bullying and stuff? I mean,
Of course.
So like in my own life as well, when I was growing up, bullying is like, part and parcel of our lives. That's the way it is, So it's not only that, I mean, school was quite brutal for us. It's not only the teachers were, punishing us heavily for anything, and then on the top, bullying is just commonplace. But I see like, even my children, when they started going to school, it did not stop with them either. So it's just like, it's one of those things in our society, just part of life.
Yeah.
And then I saw like how you try to escape from that, trauma. Same with me, like I was either involved in sports or like, more like reading books. I mean, became very, very introvert. I mean, at one point, I think when I was 14, 15, just like totally isolated myself from the society. I just could not cope with those things. So, I mean, tell us a bit more, like, so the coping mechanism, and then this 6 hours, you talked about 6 hours practice. I mean, that's huge. I mean,
yeah, I found practicing and playing quite addictive. And that is something that remains to this day. So I can't pick up the guitar and just play for 15 minutes. I become immersed in it and I want to carry on. And now I'm in a position where I'm playing pieces that are maybe 8 pages long. So it's easy to get sucked into it because not only you want to play, but you want to get better at it. And because I've taken time away from it and I'm jumping into quite a high level, I am quite bad at it now. I do need to get, practice again and because things change. My hands are a lot weaker than they used to be. My right hand is a lot slower because obviously classical guitar, you're finger picking and that speed has to be there. And it's not there anymore because the strength isn't there in my hand. I remember I used to have one thumb that was fatter than the other, and it was because of muscle. It was because that was the one that I would use as opposed to the one that would just sit. So that was me. It was lunch times and it was evenings and I loved it. I balanced my schoolwork obviously because I had to study other subjects, so it wasn't that all the time, but that was where I was truly happiest, I would say, was playing guitar. It's severely shaped me as a person.
So it looks like, the stuff about school bullying and all those, bad stuff. It's like historical problem wherever you are. It doesn't matter whether you're in the UK or in a third world country, anywhere. It just, society still doesn't know like how to deal with this. Or perhaps do you think, I mean, it's just something else going on there? It's not just a school. It's it's lots of people, the way the society is, lots of trauma behind the scene. And then, when you come to the school, it's just exposed and then.
Yes, and sadly, that is a natural fact of aging where you put all these kids in a school and everyone finds their own group. They find their place in the school system. For me, I found a home and a family within the music department and fellow musicians. So that was where I embraced the fact that I felt different. I didn't smoke. I wasn't into drinking. I was different, and I started to become really proud of that and who I was as a person, because I found a little group of people who were similar to me, and that's where I loved it. But that's why I feel it is so important to promote the creative arts in terms of that escapism. So literature through bibliotherapy, that trauma is always there. A lot of people try and censor literature, but you can't censor what's in the real world and what you can face at school. So it's really important to promote the likes of drama, music, literature for an ability to step away from the real world and immerse yourself in something else.
So like, I mean, with me, like in my later part of my life, I was more involved in like, just like French philosophy, like this existentialism, this more kind of, radical stuff. And one of the things I still remember, like, the French writer, philosopher Albert Camus. So he was quite absurdist about things happening around us, and everything is absurd, doesn't make any sense. But out of this meaninglessness, try to find some kind of meaning, and then that will get you through. So I think his idea is the only way we can actually pass this no exit situation is art. So art can be music, art can be literature, novel, anything. I still believe that. I think that's a very powerful message. So the creativity, so art, this kind of stuff, that can give you some kind of your own, I don't know, like your own nirvana kind of world where you can stay, live.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm really impressed. There's a medical course that for the student doctors, as part of the requirements, says to them, they say to them, you need to go and read X number of books, or you need to go for a run this distance, or you need to, they truly tune into the fact, they recognize the workload that's expected of their students, and they combine that, they balance that out, I feel, with a lot of information or resources to do with the creative arts. And I think that's so important, because when you get to a certain point in academia, you become immersed in your own bubble. I feel that that's a natural danger, I guess, and it's important to be able to still enjoy other aspects of life. But it is the absurdism. I mean, when you said that, the first example that popped into my head was Alice in Wonderland, where you're immersed in that world of chaos and nothing makes sense. You try and apply your own rules and logic to this world where there are none. So it's about learn to adjust your expectations and navigate your way through that kind of world. And it is a perfect form of escapism.
I mean, I'm not sure like whether I can, like tell this story in a proper way, because I mean, there's a story about this like Sisyphus. Sisyphus was punished that he has to, bring this rock up to the mountain. That's his punishment by God. The problem with this task is it's like never ending. So he has to take the rock up to the mountain and it roll over again. And then he has to do the same thing again and again and again. So, I mean, if you see our life, so our life, everyone's life has got, this kind of cycle, isn't it? So like trauma, bullying, like art. But I'm not sure like whether Sisyphus, found some kind of joys about this journey, meaningless journey. So I think, I mean, that finding that joy somewhere is really, really important. And like throughout this coronavirus time, I found that, we are stuck in this kind of situation and just not sure what to do with this.
I think the pandemic, if one positive thing can be taken out of it, is that it encouraged or forced a lot of people to slow down in terms of using technology, or just, I feel, just appreciating those around you so much more. If you lived by yourself, it was reaching out to people in a different way. So through video chat or just catching up, taking up new hobbies was a big thing. I mean, the mundane cycle, facing something that's the same can be difficult for a lot of people. I know if I have a challenging week ahead, it is, like you said, it's about finding the positives to look forward to, something to give you that change. And that's something I'm getting back into now that my PhD is finished, because for a long time it was just that. So it's so lovely being able to pick up other things again. And that's why it's important that that balance is there when you are in academia, when you are actively researching, is having that balance so that you're not just doing the one thing.
Because like one thing I really want to touch is like, because you are kind of a storyteller, you know, you have been, you know, doing this stuff about writing fiction, you know, like fantasy world. So if you are asked, you know, by your like grandchildren, you know, tell us about your memory of, you know, this like pandemic, how will you tell this story in like 2-3 minutes?
That's a really good question. I think timing wise, it coincided with a lot of my writing up period for my thesis. So therefore, a lot of the pandemic for me was spent researching bibliotherapy. And that just happened to obviously focus on, there are positive elements too, but a lot of what I focused on was how it can help you through trauma or challenges or complex situations. So reading literature that focused maybe on a young protagonist that was very isolated, and there was a fictional monster present who became her companion, and it portrayed the monster in a very different light, a very positive way as a companion, that I feel made a difference, because it got me thinking about priorities in my own life and reflecting on what I feel is important, being around family, being around people, but also strongly realizing the importance of creativity in my life. So that was when I started painting again. I started playing music. I really went back to my roots in terms of creativity, just to try and help me through a situation where everything was going on in the outside world. No one knew any amount of certainty. You didn't know how long it was going to last to begin with. I think a lot of us felt it was only going to be a few months. And then realizing it was becoming more and more difficult, that's where it was important to lean on the people around you or lean on the creative arts.
Does it mean like, you know, like, because this kind of stuff, you know, it's like our previous generation, you know, faced Second World War or First World War. They were not told that, you know, like on that year, there will be Second World War. And suddenly they were in the war, and then somehow they managed it. I mean, I think human adaptability is like amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because if we were told that, you know, like in 2019, we will head for this pandemic for no one knows how long. And I think that would have been much more dangerous to, you know, that kind of understanding that, oh my God, we are heading for this kind of serious situation. But we are in, and then we just manage somehow. We are still alive.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I guess it is a blessing in that we don't know how severe something is going to be. There's been a lot of personal circumstances that have happened in my family where we've really had to adapt quite severely, and we've really had to dig deep in terms of our own resilience and work together. So whilst COVID and everything severely, I mean, a lot of people, if they look back on the positives that came out of it, I would bet a lot of the memories would be of the NHS clapping for heroes, that kind of thing, communities rallying together to support in one way or another. A lot of the positive elements to come out of it, I would imagine, would be the people in some form or another. It would be the relationships. And I know from firsthand experience, I am a planner. I like to have everything set out. I like to know what's happening. So when things happen that you can't control, you're right, it is about adaptability and realizing what you're capable of too, actually. I am more appreciative now of the now and being around people while they're here, I feel, because things can come around that can be really scary. And I think all of us realized the severity of the virus when it first appeared in particular, and the death rates were so high. And I think for a lot of us, it made us realize and appreciate those around us, and mourn for those that we might have lost. So, yes.
Because I mean, I was planning to, touch a bit of, like document our stories on pandemic. So I think, I did that. So that's good. So like, I want to cover, like, I mean, when did you decide that you are doing PhD? Because that's a like serious undertaking, At one point in your life, you thought that, so I was like, I mean, perhaps it might give you some perspective. I was a civil servant before I did my PhD. And after 3-4 years, I thought that, oh, this job is not for me. So I just kind of, restarted my life. So tell us your story about, when did you switch to this thing?
I love my story. I'm very proud of it because it was quite similar to what happened to you, in terms of I had a fabulous job, but at the time it was thinking about career progression and longer term. And at that moment, I left a 10-year relationship that I was in. So that was a significant change for me, a significant transition, for a number of reasons that I felt it would be healthier for me to walk away. So I moved back in with my mum, and I had that going on for a couple of months. And then things were happening in my job where I was beginning to reflect on longer term goals. And it was really my best friends and my mum sat me down and they said, "You're so passionate about education and academia. You're so naturally happy there in that environment. Why don't you think about going back and doing a PhD?" Because I figured, like I said, left a relationship, gave up my car, quit my job, and then started my PhD. So it was a lot of really big things that happened. And I feel sometimes a PhD is such a large undertaking. I was self-funding. So there was a lot of barriers I had to come across, not having the shiny, sparkly grades to go into a PhD with as well. I was met with a lot of resistance, people doubting my abilities. And that can be the best thing for me sometimes because I love the challenge. So I thought, I'm going to make a go of this. I'm going to make it work. And that's where my passion and my enthusiasm for my subject, I feel shone through. I was able to work with colleagues I've worked with for several years in the past, and the wonderful department, my supervisors just gave me the freedom to truly think about what I wanted to research specifically. I secured a fellowship with Kent State University in Ohio, and it was in children's literature. And I went over and they had the most incredible collection of picture books, pop-up books, board books. And it was when I was immersed in all of that, looking at all the different examples, but talking again with the really supportive colleagues over there who explained to me about bibliotherapy. That's where I first learned about that. And I realized the significance that this genre can have. And yet it's not widely studied. It's not something that every institution offers. And I feel that's a mistake because of the power of a lot of the books involved, a lot of the stories can have on individuals of all ages. So I do feel it was a huge moment. It was a scary moment in my life because I had my life set out in one way that's how I thought I was going to live. And then everything changed in a moment. And reflecting back on the past 5 years now, it has made me such a different person. I am so grateful for it. And it's really, really transformed my life. So it's something I would always recommend to anyone.
So like, did you spend some time in like America?
Yes, I did. I went over and I met, there was another research fellow that I met with, and we were just looked after so well, and we got to study the resources. A lot of what I did was looking at different versions of the same fairy tale and how they're portrayed. So some versions of one tale, darker illustrations would put a different spin on the story overall. Or there were books where the fairy tales were illustrated by young children. So there were really kind of juvenile illustrations attached with Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, all these types of stories that we grew up with. And it's fascinating to see how it changes. That's also where I came across the pop-up book of phobias, which I will never stop talking about. I think it's fantastic, because if you're scared of something, you turn the page, it literally jumps out at you. You've got the dentist, you've got spiders. It's just amazing what they have in that in the collection, the Reinberger Center. It's fantastic.
Oh God. So like, how long did you stay there?
It was only a week, because it was in the middle of the semester. I was trying to juggle everything, but I'd love to go back and spend more time, because the collection itself is just fascinating. Yes, it's not something you come across every day, so I was very lucky to be a part of that.
So like, I mean, what made you come to Dundee? Because obviously, you were thinking of, doing PhD, you've got different options. Because I think, when students go for this PhD undertaking, they have to find that, proper people as well. That's the biggest part, So tell us a bit on those things, how to find those people and then, fit into this like amazing department in like Dundee.
So I built up a really great relationship with my primary supervisor when I did my master's. So, I mean, my undergrad was at Dundee. I went back when I was considering starting my master's. I went back in search of a professor who had taught my undergraduate, and it turned out he'd left. And that's the moment I met my primary supervisor. And again, it was just the freedom that I was given to choose a subject. A lot of my master's degree focused on psychopaths and serial killers in literature. So it was fascinating, because I love studying areas that I feel Gothic literature and horror literature really speak to me, because I feel like they can on some level speak to everyone. There's so much depth there, and I am naturally drawn to that instead of more traditional forms of English literature, Shakespeare, medieval literature, that kind of thing. I was always really interested in this popular culture and everything like that. So I had a really great relationship for that degree. I was working full time and studying part-time, and the support I was given was quite incredible from my supervisor, the department, the university, in terms of understanding about that balancing act, I suppose. So for that reason, I came back to Dundee for my PhD. I approached the same supervisor to say, my background in horror and Gothic, I have a personal interest in children's literature. What would happen if we combined them both? And that's how I ended up with research on monsters and childhood fear. And it is fascinating how it's come about. And even the journey it's taken me on, I mean, I feel like I've got a really great relationship with a lot of the department, who each have their own different areas of expertise. Finding my second supervisor from the School of Education was incredible. The opportunity that gave me, because a lot of my research is interdisciplinary. So it enabled me to view, through her guidance, it enabled me to view my area of study through a different lens. And I feel like that substantially strengthened my overall argument. Now I'm thinking about ways in which it can be applicable through the likes of STEM research that's going on, psychology, different areas, because bibliotherapy is something that can be applied in so many different ways. So it is really, I'm so grateful I studied at Dundee with the support of the department that I've had. And I just feel like it's the best place. Being able to design and deliver my own 10 credit modules in children's literature truly made a difference as well, because again, the trust that they placed on us to do this, but also realizing this is my research, but this is the impact it can have, was just fascinating. So
because like, I mean, so far you have been telling this particular word, bibliotherapy. So now the question would be, can you just explain to us a bit more, examples as well? How does it work?
Of course. So it's the concept of exploring feelings and emotions through the support of literature. So it's not prescribed literature that you would get. It's not something you would go to the doctors for. It's not that terms of thing. It's more self-directed literature. So fictional stories that are out there that cover a circumstance that could resonate with your own. So as an example, A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness focuses on a young protagonist and his journey of acceptance of the fact that his mother's dying with cancer. So the monster manifests and supports the young boy throughout the story as he goes through different stages of grief and then realizes he needs to let his mother go as she dies. Another book I often use is called Aubrey and the Terrible Ute by Horatio Clare, who so this novel explains depression to young readers from the point of view of a very young protagonist. So examples are, Dad, you look like you're walking with a very heavy hat on because he's stooped. Or he feels like he's got a furry worm in his tummy because of the anxiety. So it's ways in which really complex emotions are described to younger readers so that they might relate, they might understand. And it's really when you begin to think of literature, children's literature particularly in this way, you realize how many examples there are out there. The last chapter of my thesis covers global trauma, where I look into books that discuss the Holocaust for younger readers, or 9/11 terrorism. And some of the texts there, I was crying when I was reading them because they're so powerful, but they're written they're crafted in such a beautiful way where they do explain really monumental things for younger readers. And it's that ability, if you feel like you're struggling to understand the death of a friend when you're only 6 years old or 8 years old, it's to enable parents as well to be able to locate books that have a fictional story where the same things happened and can share that with their child to help explain, this is what's happened. Not saying that that's how, it's not a one size fits all way of resolving it. It's more, this is what's happened. Here's one way around it, perhaps.
So like, if I ask you, like, I mean, what's your title of your thesis?
So my title is Monsters, Childhood and Fear, a bibliotherapeutic approach to children's literature.
Okay.
And it's humanities-based interdisciplinary examination. So a lot of research that's been done on bibliotherapy has been conducted through scientific parameters. So looked into controlled reader groups, taken data from that and analysed it. I have conducted a purely literature-based analysis of bibliotherapeutic examples. So I am coming to this from an English literature background, and I'm looking at the texts that are currently out there, they're popular, and I'm analysing them in that way rather than scientific reading groups, because I feel like that's not something that's been done terribly often.
So basically you are choosing your books, I mean.
Yes, yeah, there was a lot of reading involved to identify these
like
books.
how to like decide that, what's the benchmark here?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm still coming across them, and I will always come across them. Um, they're the likes of Michael Rosen's Sad book, um, where the author explains, this is my sad face, and it's a character illustrated with a big smile
Mm,
and things like that. It just, there's a lot that can be taken from this, and there's a lot of mileage, I feel, because of the wealth of books involved.
mm, mm. I mean, I myself is a big fan of Michael Rosen. I mean, we are involved in like same kind of politics thing, you know. So we are, you know, we always take side with the oppressed rather than with the oppressor.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
he's a fascinating man. And I went to one of those, you know, conferences where I gave a kind of my kind of version of my understanding about what's going on in the society. And he actually, in his speech, he actually mentioned my name. And
Oh, wow. That's
so that was
amazing.
very good. No?
Absolutely. That's, oh, definitely.
He's
Yeah.
such a good guy, you know, he's such a good man.
Yeah.
You know?
The book is very powerful.
Mm,
And really, a lot. So when I teach children's literature, I always stress to the students the importance of looking into the author's background, as
mm,
well as ways in which we can interpret the text, because so often one influences the other.
mm,
So for Peter Pan, I always view that text as bibliotherapy, because J.M. Barrie's brother died as a young child. They were playing, and I don't feel like that's something Barrie was ever able to recover from.
mm,
And I feel like you can read a lot of Peter Pan with a view to, you know, the boy that couldn't grow up is similar to his brother who couldn't grow up because he passed away. So you can really find a lot of parallels when you appreciate trauma that has existed in the author's life themselves.
mm. Do do you cover like films as well a bit? No, just like the fictions and the story.
Just just fiction. I wish I could cover film, because again,
Mm,
especially the horror industry, when
mm,
you look at, that's another story for another time, but when you look at specific titles that are involved and ways in which they approach fear,
mm,
um, this is how I got into it a lot of the time. I love horror films, but I'm terrified of them. So it's that, you know, I'm sitting there absolutely petrified, but wanting to analyze why I'm scared. So I keep watching. So I wasn't able to sleep for about a year because I was trying to expose myself to all these titles and figure out what it is that scares me. For instance, the Purge series,
yeah.
I feel truly, I feel that's a little close to the bone because of the idea of monsters in society, human monsters.
Mm,
So corrupt politicians, human evil, looking into all of that touches on a lot of my work on psychopaths and serial killers.
mm,
So it is all very much interlinked. It's just not something I've done a great deal on.
mm. You know, it's like side question. I mean, one of my favorite film is Sin City. Have you seen Sin City?
I have not.
You might like this kind of stuff, you know. I don't like horror film in a sense, you know, like, you know, lots of gory stuff or blood. I like more like, you know, I'm not sure, like, did you watch like The Sopranos, the TV show?
Mm-hmm.
So like, did you see like how like violence can be an art?
Yes.
And then
I,
a very violent man can be your actually favorite character as well. You
yes.
feel, you know, some kind of kindness towards him.
Yes, yes. I personally agree with you. I am not a fan at all of splatter gore in
Mm,
films where they're very over the top. For the only reason that I feel psychological terror is much more frightening than
mm,
something that is very much made up in front of you. I really prefer the thriller type side
mm,
of things, and this is something that's been present in literature, and it's a terror versus horror, psychological fear versus gore is something that's been present in Gothic literature for hundreds of years. You know, it's
mm,
it's always been one side or another. I mean, there have been examples since where an author has balanced both. Stephen King, for example,
Yeah.
I feel is a master of both. But for me personally, it's always the Jack Torrance slowly descending into madness that gets me, rather than something like Saw, or, you know, where it's very much gore that's in front of you. That's not I'm not interested in that.
It's like so fascinating stuff, like, you know, how, you know, different genre actually attracts different kind of people. I mean, I'm not sure like how these things are attached. Like I've got two daughters, like, I mean, you know, both of them, like one of them is like really into this like horror, and but the other one, you know, like no. So like whenever we you know, as a family try to watch something, first thing she will ask that, is there any sad story here? If there's a sad story, she will not watch it.
Yeah.
Total, you know, like
Yeah.
resilient, like against any kind of sadness, any kind of or anything. It's quite interesting.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it's important to educate as many people as we can on the types of books, the types of genres that are out there, because not everyone has the time to go through as many books as I have for my thesis. Or, you know, I think we need that guidance as to recommendations for certain genres or certain kinds of books. A lot of the classics in literature are still so popular. So, but it's also about finding new books. I came across one called A Cosmology of Monsters, and it was truly fascinating because it documented the journey of a family who each had their own personal struggles, but it also looked at how they interacted with each other and how communication started to break down. And there was a lot of real life trauma infused as well. And it's just the ability to come across one or two books that you would always recommend, and teaching the humanities, teaching English literature to students who could then go on to become teachers themselves is so important for this reason, for recommending certain titles. Because you're right, there is no, you know, everyone enjoys different things, everyone's drawn to different things. So that's why it's great as well to be aware of book series where you can recommend one, but also there's 8 more in the series. And I guess we see that on Netflix, or, you know, anything we watch. If it's an episode and you see there's 5 series, that's great, because if you like it, there's more. So it's the same with books, I feel.
I mean, part of me, like, you know, tend to tell my story as a side story in this podcast. Like my best memory of my life is once I finished my PhD, the viva finished and everything. The first thing I did is I actually watched The Sopranos, 87 episodes in 2 weeks. Those are the most amazing time I spent, you know, like every single day, like just binge watching, you know, like, and this like stays with me forever, you know. It made me something, you know, special, you know. My God, this is such a serious art, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's as well why it's so important. So we have the Doctoral Academy at Dundee, and the support of the support that PGRs have, where people are saying to them, right, that's you finished, you've submitted, now you need to go away and rest, you need to go and sleep, or go and watch all the Sopranos. Find a way to cope, because it's such a big thing, it's such a monumental stage that you've reached. I've got my viva coming up, you know, that's a different story, but it's about finding a way to readjust, re-enter into society.
Like, I mean, one of the things I tell my students, you know, when they finish like PhD, I mean, I it's like more like figurative way. I tell them, you know, just go for fishing for 4 weeks. No,
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about anything else. We really want to, you know, debrief ourselves, because I think it's such a I think it's a serious journey, you know, 3-4 years when you do your PhD. It's such a big task we did. I mean, at the end, like, for example, for me, just finishing PhD was like my aim. I was not aiming for, you know, getting job or anything. No, let's just finish this bloody thing.
Yeah. It not only, I mean, yes, you have a big project, big piece of work to do, and the time, but the extent to which it changes you as a person, because you have to find the resilience to keep going in times that a lot of it's very self-directed, or you could come across experiments that don't work out as you'd expected, or there will always be speed bumps along the way. So it's about finding a way to carry on and move on with that. So yes, it's definitely an experience.
And it needs lots of self-discipline as well.
Yes.
I mean, like the way you told me that, this like 6 hours music practice, so that's the thing. I give example of, this, all those football players, we just see them play on like Saturday or Sunday, but behind the scene, they play the football every single day, 6-7 hours, so to actually, make that game possible on Saturday and Sunday.
I'm so grateful. So my version of that with my PhD and English, I'm so grateful to my colleagues and contacts and those who surround me, because I've been able to gain several publications along the way. And I feel like that experience truly shaped my writing ability, because I think that was a great opportunity to try and refine my craft, and having that the ability to do that, I'm very thankful for, because you need to put in the work, you need the self-discipline. When I first started, I didn't know anyone, and a PhD can be quite an insular thing, and I thought, I'm going to go in, I'm just going to talk to everyone. I knew a few people in the department, but I introduced myself to the other PhD students, and I built a little network of the people that were surrounding me, and that was so important, because we were able to go to each other and say, just rant if we were having a bad day, or celebrate, and that I couldn't have done that without this group of people behind me. So it is so important.
You are heading for your PhD viva. So like when you were planning, like, I mean, is there any date set up already, or?
It's in a few weeks.
Oh my God.
It was a lot sooner than I'd expected. But it's great. I've got wonderful colleagues around me who have all given me their advice about taking time away from it, not going near it, and then closer to the time revisiting my thesis, analysing. There will always be typos, I'm quite sure. So it's just about having a real sense of the argument behind me and ways in which I can take it forward. One of the decisions I made was not to isolate groups of readers, because I feel like literature should exist to inspire everyone, regardless of specifics. I think it should just inspire all readers. So that is something I specifically stated, was I'm analysing the literature as it stands. And sure, there's lots of scope for future research in different ways, but for that reason, I'm really proud of what I've come up with. So I can't ask for any more than that. And I have a wonderful examination panel as well. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Good. Because like one of the things I tell my PhD students, because when you go to the viva, you are actually going there as an expert. You are the expert.
Yeah. Yes, that's what I'm still trying to get my head around that.
So you go there, as an expert. So no.
Thank you. I do. I love sharing my story, and I love discussing the journey I've been on, and ways in which how my research has changed and for what reasons. And I feel like that's a really great opportunity to discuss that at the viva. Like I said, I couldn't have asked for more from my supervisors, my colleagues, just everyone around me. So I feel like I'm in the best place I'm ever going to be for my viva. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. And even like this podcast can be, it's like pre-adventure of viva, you did very well,
Thank you.
Because I'm not seeing any problem, because I mean, I think even you're like, the pitch, the tone, everything is like very good. So, it's very like soothing as well.
Thank you so much. Because what is bibliotherapy, and what is a monster? are two very common questions, and these are things that I need to have very strict idea of what my answer is, because a lot of people have asked me it so far, and it's great because it's not, neither of them are one size fits all, because it's not a scientific thing where there is one answer. It's something that different people can take different things from it. So yeah, yes.
So I'll just like take another 4 or 5 minutes. One thing I really want to ask you is like, the advice for the future PhD students who are coming to university, like, do this kind of research, either in literature or in the social sciences or in the humanities. What kind of mindset they need in the beginning?
So they need to realize that things won't always work out the way they expect. And that sounds a little bit patronizing, but it's so important, because I've come across people who have told me flat out, you are not good enough for this. You'll never get funding, your writing's not of standard. It's that brutal, especially if you publish too. The reviewer comments can be very tough. It's about expecting feedback and how to process that so that it's a positive thing, because it is. In a lot of cases, feedback is there to help you. So it's about realizing you write something, you get errors or feedback, you redo these bits, and then you submit it. That for me is just the process of publishing. So when I realized that's also the process of your PhD and your viva, your thesis, I was a lot more accepting of that, because it's what I'm used to. So I would definitely, for a mindset wise, you need resilience, you need to be adaptable, you really, really need to focus on well-being. So a balance needs to be there, whether it's building a network of fellow PGRs, going out for walks, finding a way to balance so that you're not constantly studying, because that's what I was doing. Nowadays, we're so fortunate to have the Doctoral Academy at Dundee, who are there. They offer wellbeing sessions and just there to support. And it's about, I am so grateful, like I said, of the support I've had over the years. So that is really important too. And just having fun as well, remembering why you're there. You need to have that passion drives a lot of your research. And I feel it comes through in the writing. So always remembering why you're doing it.
Thank you, Lauren. I'll just this is my personal question, because I'm interested in this particular author, Stephen King. Which book do you recommend of him? I find his books not either very big or too complicated. Where to start? But I understand that he's great.
Yes, I'm a big fan. I've published on 3 of his books. 2 that I would recommend. One is The Shining. And the other one is one of the doorstops, but is worth it, is It. Because with the character of Pennywise, it actually involves a lot of King's personal inspiration that he's taken from fairy tales. So a lot of it was based on the Billy Goat's Gruff, who's tripping over my bridge, that kind of thing. Something that's underneath was obviously Pennywise, but the different personal manifestations that character, that figure takes, depending on each person's fear, I found really interesting. For The Shining, it was the first book that ever terrified me. And again, it's that subtle art of being able to create goosebumps on the reader, when they're immersed in it. I think they're very interesting. Another book, so the 3rd book that I published on was Dr. Sleep, which is the sequel to The Shining. And it's about Danny Torrance as an adult. And I feel like that was written very well, because The Shining has got such a name for itself. Sometimes that's difficult to maintain. But again, it was very, very well received. There's still some of his books that I'm not a fan of. I'm not saying all of them are fantastic, but certainly for horror in general, it would be The Shining, and it for Gothic beauty, it would be Dracula by Bram Stoker. They're my main recommendations in that side. And then you've got children's books, you know, so that's the whole other kettle of fish. But yeah.
Thank you, Lorraine. I mean, absolute pleasure, you know.
As always.
So like, good luck for your PhD viva, you know. I'm not seeing any problem here, you know. So we'll see like Dr. Lorraine Christie very soon.
I hope so. It was lovely to see you, Abdullah. Thank you so much for having me.
And also we'd love to have in our Dundee University as well, as a colleague, proper colleague, you know.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.